Alright guys, welcome to this podcast. This one I am talking about energy, discernment, and I'm honestly just flowing in this podcast. I'm just going. I got so inspired, I just wanted to do a podcast, and that's what this one is about. This episode is sponsored by Casa House. Casa House is run by Mateo and Laura here in Chicago, and their intention is to bring Latin culture and community into the city space. And they will be hosting their first event, which I will be a part of, September 29th at Fulton Market Kitchen. At the time of this podcast comes out, their tickets could still be available. If not, hit me up. Maybe I can help you out. I do have a +1. I haven't given it to anybody yet. But this episode is sponsored by them. Look out for them for more cultural events in the city. And here's the podcast. Alright, we live. Let's jump right into it with some affirmations and intentions. Affirmations today are: you are worthy, believe in yourself, and trust the universe is working in your favor, which is good because that's kind of what I want to talk about today. And my intentions today are really right now it's 11:07 p.m. on a Wednesday night after a long day of work, just a long day in a good way. But I just felt so called to shoot this podcast and talk. And I have some notes here, but I'm really just going to flow. And I just want to thank anybody for listening, tuning in. That's my intention, just for flow and sharing my excitement and some things that are happening. Where do I even start? I think I wanted to talk kind of about mindfulness today. And like I've said in my last podcast, I am not a professional in any sort of way. I'm not like someone that you should fully, I'm a human. But I want to talk about mindfulness and the impact mindfulness is having on my life these days. I've been doing a lot of mindful things my whole life, but as of lately, I have really been taking the time to connect with myself on deeper levels and lean in on practices that I always knew were right for me, but I never went to the full extent. So let me try to wrap it in here in a good, cohesive way that makes sense. So I think recently I went through a pretty rough time, a dark time. Not dark and I guess it was kind of a depression, but I was in a relationship. I ended things, and then I was left being alone, and it was my first time kind of being alone in a long time. And as an adoptee, shout out to my adoptees, you know that relationships can be extremely triggering, and also just being alone can be a lot. And I think when I finally got to the point of feeling the aloneness, it was my first time. I got my Buddha teas here. Actually, let me see what this says. Contentment is the greatest wealth. That's the Buddha teas affirmation today. The relationship, you sometimes as an adoptee realize that you have a lot of wounds and things that you're not dealing with, or relationship is a really healthy thing to be in. Not saying my last relationship wasn't healthy, but there's a lot of good things being in a relationship. But when that person is gone, or whether it's a death in the family, when grief hits you, you cannot stop those waves, baby. So you got to surf them. So recently I went through that, and I had become face to face with this really, really, really deep part of me that was hurt. Not of being abandoned, but of just being alone. And I don't know how to get too deep into that, because it's just it's just a full spectrum of so many different things connected to that. But the main idea is grief, and letting yourself feel this grief and this sadness. And I was in this bed over here, really crying deeply, and really letting my body feel something that I would run away from, because I'm 30 years old and I'm sick of it. I went to my counselor and I was pouring my heart out, went to my friends, pouring my heart out, went to my parents, pouring my heart out, and I'm just sick of it. I'm sick of living a certain way in life, and like a lot of things around me have reflected that my like not a lack of accountability, but just like half-assed energy is like just so much of a reflection around me. So with that grief brought me to a space of, it's time to feel your shit. Stop running away from what you're scared of, what you're fearful of, what hurts. And I say all that because that's where mindfulness comes in. Like, I let my body feel what it had to feel. I cried it out, and not saying I'm perfect or healed, but I'm very like kind of aware of where I was hurt. So now if I find myself, and I wrote down a whole list, I don't have the list right now because I said this is an impulsive podcast, but I wrote down a whole list of all these different ways that I cope. And then on one side, it's all the ways that I cope, and then the other side, it's all the ways to cope healthily. And some of the things are like, instead of like doom scrolling or eating, binge eating, or like masturbation, or like, what else was on there? I wish I had the list, but it was a list of probably like 7 things, right? And so there was 7 different things that I know that I do when I don't want to feel my shit, and I just want to like distract myself and give myself a dopamine hit. And then on the other side, I put everything else that I know works for me. And that leads me to the next topic, which is just discernment and becoming aware of what's happening. And it's so much easier said than done. Oh my God, it's so much easier said than done. Especially because sometimes you don't realize that you're coping or disassociating. But if you can get familiar with yourself enough to recognize what's going on, you can practice discernment. And like I said, I'm not perfect, but I've been doing pretty good these days, and that's why I wanted to come into this podcast, because I have been doing a lot of breath work, a lot of somatic work, a lot of like going to the gym, breathing, sweating, moving, stretching, like getting my body to a vibrational state that can handle the type of life that I know I'm capable of living. And now that I'm stepping into that energy and that frequency, things around me are reflecting that. So that's exactly why I came in here today, and I said that so perfectly, I think. And that breath work I've been doing, I was doing it every morning for a couple of weeks, and now it's become like every other morning and nighttime. But the breath work has really, along with the people that facilitate the breath work, they're really good with visualization and mindfulness, and it's allowed me to start to not rewire, because that's a catchphrase these days, but like really speak to myself from a place of love. And like when I find myself wanting to cope, or I find myself talking to myself, I don't really ever talk to myself negatively, but late at night. But when I find myself needing to be kind to myself and come from a place of love, the work I've been doing in the breath work has been really coming in handy. That on top of going to the gym. I go to the gym, I do Stairmaster for 30 minutes every time before I do my workout, and that Stairmaster, I push myself, and like every day, it's cool because like every day I go in there, I want to sweat more, so I up the difficulty, whether it's the speed, whether it's the way I step on it, whether it's the way I breathe. I always keep my breathing consistent. But when you push yourself physically like that, mentally something happens where you are expanding your threshold for discomfort. And I think when you do that, especially if you are like doing that shadow work and becoming familiar with your discomfort, you know that you have the capacity to deal with small, difficult things. And then as you expand that, you become more aware of what is discomforting and how much you can handle. And then you learn, okay, maybe this is a lot right now, but you can be aware of it. You can acknowledge that. You can cope in a healthy way, whether it's like going for a walk, soaking up some sun, drinking some water, eating some raw produce, organic, like nice things for your body, doing breath work, stretching, calling a friend, like just listening to music, some dancing. If you like plant medicine, eat some mushrooms. I'm not condoning that for everybody because I don't want to do that in this space, but if you know it works for you, it works for you. And then on top of that, I know I'm going all over the place, but welcome to the show. But on top of that, I've also been reading this book that has been gifted to me by my friend Tom Cat. And the book is called The Celestine Prophecy. It's a super popular book. It's not like a book that's just like unknown. Like, people have been reading this for decades. But this book is a fictional story, but there's a lot of things in there which I could probably do a whole podcast on it itself. But it reminds me of my ayahuasca experience, which that could be its own podcast as well. But it talks about energy and being connected to your intuition and looking for these signs and signals from the universe to know that you're on the right path, to trust your intuition, to be aware of energy. And for example, I bring that book up because that's what discernment is about. Like, discernment is being aware of what's going on with your energy. Like, napping was one of my coping mechanisms. I just remember that. But are you about to cope because you're tired? You need water? Are you hungry? Are you sad? Are you angry? Do you have something that's coming up for you that you don't know how to process? So then instead of dealing with that, you are just going to like give yourself a dopamine hit for something that's mindless. So that's where the discernment and mindfulness comes in. And in this book, there's such a good insight. They call it insights in the book. Like, every time the main character discovers a new truth, they call it an insight. And one of the insights he discovers, spoiler alert, is people are emitting energy. And in the book, you can see the energy. It's like an aura field. And sometimes when the two people are interacting with each other, you can see the energies are playing a tug of war. They're either like pulling from each other or pouring into each other. And I love that visual because that's stuff I've seen in my own life. Like, this book isn't anything new, but it's a good like sequence of events to make you like really like aware of this in your waking reality and how it works in day-to-day life, if you think this way. But especially the last couple of months personally that I've been going through, I've been just dealing and coping healthily and meeting myself in my dark, shadowy places, that when I come back into the world and interacting with people, I'm so honest with where I'm at. I let people know I've been going through it, but also at the same time, I can feel when somebody's energy isn't pouring into me, or I can feel when someone is a draining energy, or I can feel if I'm not giving somebody energy and I'm trying to take their energy, and it's helping me be aware and mindful of like, okay, how am I showing up in these spaces? Why am I showing up in these spaces? Who are these people in my spaces? How are my thoughts internally impacting the world around me? And okay, I'm going off the rails, but that's the type of stuff that I'm talking about. Like, becoming aware of your own internal energy is the start of realizing that your external world is so connected to the internal. And like, you just got to be able to sit with it, whether it's positive or negative. And I don't think anything's really negative. Things can just be like really confrontational and make you have to sit with it. But as long as you are able to find where you stand in your current situation, whether it's with family, friends, money, career, artistic ability, things that bring you fear in general. Like, for example, for me, I know I want to become a better singer. I don't like doing karaoke. I have family in Colombia that always wants me to sing, but half the time I say no because I don't like singing in front of people. But recently I've enrolled in singing lessons, and it was so scary to be in my first singing lesson last week, singing for this strange woman in Spain. She's not a strange woman, but like a stranger. And that's the type of stuff where like you can face your fears, start small, and like realize that like you have to get comfortable in the uncomfortable. And it's so cliche, people say it all the time, and like I said, I'm human. I'm not a perfect poster child for any of this, but like I've really noticed the difference when I've really noticed the difference when things are happening around me that are like because of the things I've been doing internally. For example, like I've been really working on my self-worth and like abundant mindsets versus scarcity mindsets, and now there's things happening in my waking reality that are reflecting that internal work and that knowledge of self. Okay, I'm gonna take a breath. I'm gonna take a little sip of this tea. And that's it. I think that's it. I'm at 15 minutes now, and I just wanted to come here. I was so inspired, and I wanted to share this energy and like let people in on this. I have some notes here. Let me see if I missed anything before I tap out. Discernment, energy conservation, mindful coping mechanisms, visualization. Visualization is important, but it's more important to do the small daily habits, I think. Feeling your pain, somatic work, look into it. I won't talk about it right now. Somatic work, finding what grounds you. Oh my God, these all could be their own podcasts. Yeah, maybe my next podcast will be about my ayahuasca experience and the things that ground me, because that helps find your center, and then that's when like that knowledge of self starts to like build around your center and your foundation. Yeah, I think that's it. That's where I'm going to stop it. That's the podcast. But thank you. I went on a rant, and that was a quick one. I was like, so thank you for listening. Again, again, if you want to support, I got my payment handles down here. Subscribing is the biggest way to support. Money is cool, but like I said, there's so many different ways to support. Share it with friends. Save it for later. Leave a comment. All those good things, that people are already looking for on social media. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for listening, and I will see you at the next podcast. Ciao.